third of all wells are currently broken, right? So we have about $450 million of broken wells that are scattered across Africa. And that is a huge issue. So many good intentions are going into that perfect, beautiful moment of the photo being taken at the well with water squirting out for the first time. But what we really care about is that well working the next month, the next year, the next 2 years? Who's maintaining that well? Do people in the community have the tools, the spare parts, and the training to keep that well working? And what's that financial mechanism that's going to make that a sustainable long-term business model? It's not how many wells we build or how many schools we build. It's, are there still kids in the classroom learning? Are people still getting clean water? How are we leaving people better off tomorrow based on what we gave today?
Hey, Becky.
Welcome, everybody. Are you ready?
I mean,
are you
we're
ready
like
for an
buckled up.
epic conversation?
We've been counting this one down. So excited for this person, this human, this mission. It's going to be so good.
The story we're about to bring to you is going to awaken your empathy and your humanity, and I hope it challenges you to think about things and think about your charity and think about the ethics and the dignity and the way that we engage in philanthropy and empowerment. But we got to give a shout out to our godmother, Susan McPherson. You know how much we love her. We talk about her and her wisdom on the podcast all the time, but she has brought and connected us to our incredible guest, Becky Straw. She is the co-founder and CEO of the Adventure Project. And folks, I fell in love with this nonprofit when I started to go down a rabbit trail of what they were doing. But Becky has this passion to revolutionize giving and create movements that marry good intentions with a measurable impact. Is this our person or is this our person?
This would be
what
our
an
person.
aspirational goal. It's so she was one of the leaders and early employees at Charity Water. But the thing we love so much about her is she had an awakening in Haiti. And I'm going to allow you to tell that story. We love Haiti. Our resident producer, Unicorn Julie, has been there. We feel such a kinship to that country and to those people. But I think the thing that I love so much about the Adventure Project, it is taking what we have talked about many times on this podcast, which is how do you go into a community and create empowerment? How do you create jobs and employment and economic drivers instead of giving charity? Because that is how we really start to begin to teach someone how to fish. And we want everyone in this world to be a thriving individual. So I want to give a little bit of background on the Adventure Project because their mission is just so inspirational. But they help people in developing countries by supporting grassroots social enterprises that give people the means to help themselves. And the thing that we love so much about them, it's about investing in dignity. And they support organizations that treat people as people, not as the poor or the marginalized. And everyone who has listened to this podcast even once knows that our core value is that everyone matters. And we love how this upholds this core value that community is everything and everyone has something to give. And the last thing that I have to say is Becky and her co-founder Jody are the recipients of the 2015 Diane von Furstenberg People's Voice Award for Female Founders Making a Difference. And because of that, they were the recipient of $1 million Bitcoin donation from the Pineapple Fund, which I hope accelerated this amazing work. And I just can't wait to hear all about it. Becky, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I feel like I need to wake up every morning listening to that intro because you made me feel so good.
You've done all that. And I have to tell everybody listening, I have like a 2-page bio on Becky and I couldn't even read it all because she's so extraordinary and kind. And I just want to know your story. And I want to know about Becky growing up. You little Becky, not me, little Becky. We're going to be confused in the podcast. But I want to know, where did you grow up and where did this heart for justice and equity come from?
Yeah, I grew up in California, in the Bay Area, and I was really fortunate to have really great parents and a really great church. There's not a ton of church life in Northern California, but my parents were churchy social justice people. And it was a really small church congregation that was very active in the community and the surrounding community. So everything about youth group was really focused on how could you do more to serve others. And I walked away from that experience being like, I've never been happier than when I was serving others. I was a swimmer. I swam in college. That was kind of my thing. I graduated from undergrad and went like, gosh, I've spent so much of my time just like focusing on my own academics, focusing on my own swimming. Like, when was I actually the most alive and the most happy? And that was, when I was in youth group doing some sort of service opportunity. And I just craved more of those experiences, not only as being a volunteer, but then how do I get to the other side of working for a really high impact organization that's really going to empower other people?
I mean, I love that answer, because we also talk about, since Becky and I both have kids, it's just, we're always trying to infuse these values like into our families, and I think talking to so many founders, you realize that it really does matter, like your experiences and your perspectives. Not that you can't always gain, some of that, but why not, like want to really pour into the younger generation, because they do grow up and want to invest in a different way and show up in a different way. And so that's why we're really leaned into this next upcoming generation, because we feel like there's that awakening happening across the board. So, okay, take us from growing up to like this transition. I know you've, worked in different charity and then just really had this vision to come together for Adventure Project. Kind of give us that piece of your story.
And if there's a part of Haiti in there, we definitely want to know that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
There is a part of Haiti. Sure. So, I, after college, went to Romania because it actually was the cheapest place to volunteer. And I didn't have a lot of money.
Wow.
That's how you make
Like
decisions.
sorting by price on where you can go. Been there.
It's light and it's cheap, But that really gave me a heart to understand that I knew so little about development and about what I was doing. I was helping volunteer in a government orphanage, but in the town, which was about 10 minutes away, there was a whole bunch of street kids, and it was negative 20 degrees some days, and they didn't have shoes, they didn't have socks. And so first mistake I made was another volunteer and I raised all this money for shoes and socks. And we thought, here we are like the Oprah of shoe givers. I'm so good at this job.
You get some socks. You get some shoes.
It was knockoff Nikes, from Eastern Europe. And we were like throwing them at the kids. Felt great. The next week we went back to buy our groceries. All the socks and shoes were gone. The kids took them off. I don't know what happened. I don't know if the parents sold them. I don't know what the deal was, but I realized, well, that was a huge mistake, because that was me assuming I knew what was best for those kids. And maybe that parent of that kid on the street needed to sell them to buy food or buy medicine. And how arrogant of me to assume that might be that family's greatest need, right? So making some mistakes made me realize, like, I need to go back to grad school, and I need to focus on international development, but also, social enterprise and administration. Like, how do we really, create organizations that create impact and end up empowering people by listening to people and what they actually need? So that was what led me to go to Columbia. I got into Columbia in New York. They have a great program there that also connected me to an internship at UNICEF's Division of Water and Sanitation. So I went to like a beautiful windowless cubicle, analyzing a whole bunch of data. And doing my internship there, I got connected through my supervisor to a man by the name of Scott Harrison, who was this kid starting this charity and working off his couch. I begged Scott through a series of various emails and conversations to let me volunteer on his couch after I graduated. I took all the data with me, like all the free packets from anything, and carted it over to his apartment and just said, look, I've spent the last year analyzing water and sanitation data. Can I help you? So he first said no, and then he agreed finally. And I worked there for the first 3 years as the third employee, basically helping get the organization whatever they needed to get off the ground and be successful, from the back end operations to then program development. Ended up spending about a third of my time in Africa and Haiti, figuring out, who are local partners doing really great water and sanitation work, and how can we make sure that they're getting the tools and resources they need to bring clean water to people. So
I just see your life in these chapters, and I'm just like, each one is really preparing you for what's to come. And I just think, what a unique perspective to be on the ground floor of something like Charity Water that's clearly changed the game on so many different levels. But, I know you had it within you to do something or kind of maybe approach things differently. What was that next step looking like whenever you stepped out and did Adventure
Yeah.
Project?
Yeah. And Jody and I met actually in Liberia, my co-founder and I. She was Charity Water's largest individual fundraiser at the time. She has 6 kids. The last 2 were twins adopted from Sierra Leone. So that instilled in her a sense of purpose to think globally as well. And just, she was kind of an OG blogger before everyone's on TikTok, a billion people doing TikTok. Just kind of, she's super authentic as a person and humble. And so people follow her journey. And we became fast friends around this idea that, how can we just make sure that our money is doing the most good to really help people like us? We're never going to become Bill Gates and be able to give away millions of dollars, but we still want to know that our $20 is doing the most good in the world that it could and can do. And so we really wanted to carry the torch of where Charity Water started this incredible mission and movement of redefining and reinventing what charity looks like in terms of motivating millions of people to give. And we thought, well, let's do something to really take it to the next level and say, let's really focus on what's actually going to move people out of poverty. Can we focus on the most effective, low-cost solutions that are going to create the most good in the world? And how can we do that effectively and bring a collective movement of people who share those same values with us? So, the perfect example of that is that there are so many organizations out there that are drilling wells right now, but only a third of all wells are currently working. Or I'm sorry, a third of all wells are currently broken, right? So we have about $450 million of broken wells that are scattered across Africa. And that is a huge issue. That's a huge global problem, is that so many good intentions are going into that perfect, beautiful moment of the photo being taken at the well with water squirting out for the first time. But what we really care about is that well working the next month, the next year, the next 2 years? Who's maintaining that well? Do people in the community have the tools, the spare parts, and the training to keep that well working? And what's that financial mechanism that's going to make that a sustainable long-term business model? So
I love that we're having this conversation. And before we move forward, I just have to point out something that I'm just observing about you. And just for you to have this moment in Romania where you had such self-awareness and you did self-reflection to say, I think I missed the mark here. And I want to say that you were kind of hard on yourself. And I'm like, what you did was a beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. And what you did was so kind. And whether it was warming someone's feet or whether those shoes were sold to feed someone, it's like, I feel that the good intention in there had to be infused at some point. But I love this thread of humble leadership that you have. And it's rooted in listening and understanding and looking at data and going to the root of the problem. And I think this is a lot of the problem in nonprofit, is we hit things at such a surface level, and these issues are systemic, and we have to go deeper into the issue to figure out how can we actually affect change. And the empowerment component of it is so beautiful. I mean, what you're describing to me, we have our pet charity of Water For. We love them so much. And they do exactly what you say about empowering people and providing really low tech, because this equipment has to be sustainable in the most, harsh of environments and those kinds of things. So I love what you're doing here. I love how you're such a listener. I love how you see all people. And I want to talk about the Adventure Project, because I think it is such a beautiful organization. And I want to compliment you on how you storytell and the ethical storytelling that I feel like is all over your website. The women that are on your site have so much joy in their faces. They have love, and I don't know, there's some sort of spark there. So I love the way that you have expressed that. But I want you to go and tell us how this organization came to be and what is the lifeblood of it, and just share a little bit of the history and the mission.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think, I think a lot of it comes through ethical storytelling of having a really phenomenal photographer, and that's Esther Havens, who is a humanitarian photographer who's shot for many people, and we became fast friends working together at Charity Water. And she has infused just next level best practices in terms of every single person on our website we know their name and we know their story, and they have a signed waiver that we're allowed to use their photo. I also think she's just brilliant at how she captures stories. There aren't pictures of starving kids and torn clothing and women in hospitals suffering, right? These are people at their best, not at their worst. And that's how we wanted to start our organization, was let's really capture people at their best. And sometimes that means even waiting for women. There was a woman who was a farmer, and we were there taking pictures and showing her, and she's like, "Can I change my outfit?" We're like,
yes, that's universal in every language for women.
She put on her Sunday best dress, and she wanted a photo of her and her family in their Sunday best. And I think taking time to do those things ends up really in the long run creating a product you're so proud of, and a stories you're proud to tell because you've spent time listening to people and not just hearing a surface level 5-minute conversation, but you went deep with people. And I think people appreciate being heard, and I think supporters really appreciate that level of storytelling.
Okay, I have to riff on. Oh, go ahead, John.
Sorry, Jay. My throat is keeps clogging. I think the other aspect, and this is just such a sidebar, but I love that you can also gift that photography to a family, to get to have somebody like Esther come to your country, be there, spend time to make you and your family just radiance on this film, I think is just such a gift to that family too. And I think that's part of the dignity of it too, celebrating what that means for a family to have a photo that shows that.
And I also think I want to compliment you, and I want to make sure that nobody else misses this as they're listening. You said there is storytelling in photography, and you are 100% accurate. And I know everyone has listened to us harp on this podcast about stop using stock photography unless you're, in a domestic situation or a trafficking situation. Use authentic people as your story. And the medium of photography is very much a storytelling arc, just as much as your written words, as video are. There is an expression there. And I think a really great photographer, Esther Havens, holy smokes, she can catch nuance, in a look, in something that is so slight that will grab somebody. So I think that is an excellent pro tip. We've had a lot of interest around ethical storytelling this year, specifically because it's one of our 8 trends for 2022. And I think that was a great tip for how you can start. But I want to transition into the Adventure Project, and I want you to tell us how this came to be, and how did this get developed? How did you center your mission, and what did this look like when Jody and you were kind of coming together to put this dream together?
Yeah, and I think, people always love to say, well, here is this one story, right? Like Adam Braun will say, a kid asked for a pencil and I wanted to start an education charity, And I wish my marketing story was so simple, but I would say it was a series of moments. And one of the main moments was just the sheer number of repetition of people who would come up to me in every country I went to. And then it started to become nearly every trip. Somebody would come up to me and say, "Ma'am, thank you so much for this well. I'm wondering if you're hiring." And then they would spout out the reasons why they want a job. They'd have their kids with them. They'd say, "I just need to earn. I don't need to get paid months. I just want to send them to school." And you're like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? What are we doing? There are so many people who the number one dream of people around the world is a good job. And I think we get so caught up in saving the world and trying to be saviors that we forget that people want to save themselves. They want to save their own families, and they deserve the opportunity to work, and they are just missing those opportunities, but they have so much purpose and so much, passion to work. So that was something that I think just kept speaking to my heart. And as a Christian, I kept thinking okay, what are you telling me, God? Maybe I'm dense and you have to keep telling me every country, but I think it's really, really true and really speaks to that. And, the second thing was just seeing aid that I thought could be more effectively allocated. And I speak to that on in terms of the water projects. It was heartbreaking to go back and see that there's so many wells that are broken, or you go into a village and you see 8 wells that used to be functional, and then you see one that's left that's still working, and that was 8 different charities that went in to do them. So I think we sometimes become so passionate and such good marketers that we forget about longevity and sustainability as being our most important benchmark. It's not how many wells we build or how many schools we build. It's, are there still kids in the classroom learning? Are people still getting clean water? You know, how are we leaving people better off tomorrow, based on what we gave today?
Becky
we need
Straw
to
is
replay
shaking
that
it
every
up,
day in
and
our
I
life.
love it.
Well, I think it's like so much in life. It's like it's the stuff that's not glamorous that really, really matters, you know, and it's not the things that are easy to give to, but they're the things that are sustainable and consistent, and what that means for a family, and especially over the course of like generations, what that means. So, you know, this is a little off script, but I watched a video of you kind of casting vision for your programs and everything. And I know you've put that number out there to, you know, employ 1 million, help 1 million women find jobs by 2030. Is that right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's an
Insert applause
audacious,
emoji.
it's an audacious number, because again, we're not sitting across the screen from somebody that just wants her marketing point, that you're like, no, I want to legitimately, you know, give livelihood to these families. So how do you actually activate that? How do you use entrepreneurship and VC or all these different mechanisms that y'all are activating to employ people, to give them jobs, and not you employ them, but them to be able to be employed?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with our model and mission is all about empowering local organizations. It's never my job to go in and tell a community how to build a system. You know, instead we have local organizations who are doing incredibly impactful work, and a lot of those organizations, you know, when I was spending so much of my time in Africa, I saw their passion and their heart, and their leaders had these phenomenal ideas, but yet they lacked a lot of the resourcing they needed to scale. You know, I saw this, you know, juxtaposition of like, well, Americans are the most generous country in terms of philanthropy. Why aren't we making sure it's going to the right places to empower these people to be the change in their own communities? So it's kind of like a triple ripple approach, where we're supporting a local organization. 50% of our organizations we support now are female founded, which we think is important to us, to make sure that we're giving women leaders opportunities to grow. And then they're going out, they're providing training and hiring people locally where they're working to become entrepreneurs, whether that's helping farmers to learn how to grow more food, to helping well mechanics fix and maintain wells and start a business there. And then those people, those parents now have the jobs and the income and the stability locally to serve their communities. So,
Wow, I'm so impressed by you. And I just love this empowerment piece. And it really reminds me of something Tammy Tibbetts, with She's the First, has just posted this incredible Bloomerang equality article this week that really hit me in the face. And it was talking about the lost girls of COVID, and that for 25 years, girls in developing countries have been on this trajectory to grow and to get educated and to be empowered. And the pandemic has just hit this population so hard. And so I would love it if you could shine some light on what women around the world in developing nations are facing in light of the pandemic, and how we can help empower them and get that train back on the track.
Definitely. Yeah. You know, Tammy said it so well, and she's so wise. And I think a lot of that also correlates to women, and it correlates to people living in extreme poverty. Extreme poverty was decreasing every year for the last 20 years until COVID hit. And so what we're seeing is an extreme rise in not only, you know, female inequality and poverty inequality, as more people are slipping into extreme poverty, but that translates to lives lost. 250,000 children died last year in 2021 because of starvation in East Africa, not even the continent, just focusing on East Africa. And that is a really sad and unfair way to die. You just see so many parents who are trying to do the best they can. And it's, I think with COVID hitting us so hard, I think we talk about this as parents, like it's hitting us so hard dealing with no childcare, trying to work full-time jobs, managing so much, managing being sick, having COVID, but I think we need to recognize that all of those things are also hitting people who are currently only making $2 a day or less than $2 a day. And now, they're not allowed to go to the market to sell their produce or go, into the community to do their jobs. So, I think without being too much of a Debbie Downer, one of the things that we realized at Adventure Project that to me sounds so silly in retrospect is we had been working at the Adventure Project for a decade, and then COVID hit, and we realized that we actually had a name for the jobs we were creating, and that was that they're essential workers, and that these are people on the front lines. Wow. And we started getting phone calls and emails coming in saying, okay, the government gave us clearance to provide, as healthcare workers, we're still allowed, even though the government shut down our streets, we're given badges to go out and still provide maternal health care to pregnant moms and sick kids. We just need gloves and we need masks. Can you help us, right? And so we started to get these requests that were traditionally more emergency response mechanisms or requests. And, we have always focused on sustainable development. So we turned around and said, like, well, why don't we ask our donors if that's something they want to support, and how can we ask our monthly members, do you want to allocate your gift this month instead to provide these basic things? They need hand washing stations. And we just got very detailed and, like you said, kind of unsexy about it and said, these are the things that are really going to make a difference right now. And we saw an overwhelming amount of support for that. And I think that helped to build some transparency and some more trust that people know where their donations are going. So as you talk about scale and as you talk about wanting to impact so many more jobs, I think for us, it's really being brave. I've been fortunate to work under Scott Harrison for 3 years. If you ever want a brave person, talk to Scott.
Right.
Someone who sets a big vision and big goals. But in my heart of hearts, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, the work is working. And I know that sounds so silly to say, but it really was a little bit of a risk for us when we started. We're like, would donors would they appeal to the unsexy stuff, right? It's so much easier to see a picture of a kid drinking dirty water and say they need a well, we realized, after 10 plus years that there is an audience for that. And there's a lot of people and there's corporate partners and there's a lot of different organizations that are joining with us, which we're really grateful for, and individuals that are joining with us too. So we have about 10,000 donors so far, but we're really hoping to expand and impact more people as we grow.
10,001. I'm making a donation before we get off. I'm so inspired by this. But I do think that I want to hit on something that honestly I feel like is an elephant in the room in this sector. And you hit on it beautifully, which is sometimes we get so caught up in trying to sell the shiny thing to our donors. We try to put ourselves in their shoe, and we try to put, the sexiest project that's just going to look, appeal to a very specific niche. And it's like, if our needs are so basic, then we need to be talking about that, because I'm feeling my privilege so much in this conversation, because you're right. We do have access in this pandemic to unbelievable resources and offerings and help. And I do think that if the needs are so basic, then it's our job as nonprofits to go in and storytell that need and say, and I would say hit it between the eyes and say, we know that this is not, something that's traditionally funded, but this is what we need to achieve X. And I really appreciate that you're doing that and going for it, because to me, you're doing exactly what we said at the beginning. You're getting to the root of the problem. And when you get to the root of the problem, everything that comes after that doesn't seem as overwhelming. And I have to ask you this question, which is entirely off script, because I'm just so curious. How do you manage these stories and these people from a mental health perspective, from an emotional perspective, the heartbreak, the desire? I just feel like such an empath in you and want to help everybody. How do you separate that as a founder and not get sucked into the, oh my gosh, this guy just came up and said, I just want a job. How do I just give him some money? And that's not the solution, but how are you distancing yourself from the emotion of coming into these stories and hearing even the hardship?
When you find out, please tell me how to do that.
I haven't figured it out at well. I'm working through it in therapy. Who
No,
knows?
and I have, since I've had kids, and people warn me, they're like, oh, when you have kids, this is going to get harder. Other people in the sector, and they were so right. Because as soon as I had kids and I saw that mom, I'm like, that's me. That could be me. I'm so grateful I have emotions. I'm so grateful that I still feel really sad about some of the things I've seen and heartbroken, because that wakes me up every morning, and it wakes me up and say, everybody should know about this. Everybody should know that the solutions are not hard or expensive or going to waste, but you're actually going to make a tangible difference with your $10 donation, right? Like your money goes so much farther if you're focused on high impact, low cost solutions. Like you're just really transforming people's lives in deep ways, and that's a great thing. So if I wasn't crying about it, I think I'd be a little bit worried that that something's wrong, you know?
That was beautiful. I agree with you.
Yeah. And I feel like you've given me multiple sucker punches, in this interview today, you know, but I can't get over the fact of being there trying to provide aid or coming in with a team to serve and being said, hey, it's not taken away from the spirit of gratitude, but it's just what we really need is a job, you know, while y'all are doing this job in our country. Like it's such a paradigm shift. And I feel like this is the reason Becky and I feel so, led to have these type of conversations that make us uncomfortable, because there's not an easy solution. Mm-hmm. But this is what we want to empower people to go back and have these conversations, because we do have a lot of resources. We have a lot of incredible donors that are with us in mission, and we can help shift the narrative, how we can really move things around the world to the betterment of people that are struggling and people that want to be empowered and just need something simple. So I do believe in the power of this community listening today, that we can shift the narrative on this. So I'm full tilt in. Okay, we love storytelling, and I want to hear how philanthropy's personally impacted you. You know, we believe it's transformational for the giver and obviously the person being impacted. But is there something that's hung with you on your journey of how philanthropy's really moved?
Yeah. Well, I think I'll share, speaking along the same vein, since that's what we're talking about, is when we were just starting out, you know, Jody is the wife of a worship pastor. I had been working at a startup charity. Neither of us married rich, unfortunately, but I was single at the time. And so, the first year we started, we decided not to take salaries. We ended up only making about $150,000 the first year. Which, isn't enough because we weren't taking it. So I started to move onto friends' couches and just was couch hopping. And we put money into like a beautiful video that was raising a lot of money and support. And a producer at a huge news agency, I won't share the name, contacted me and said, we're going to Haiti to do a recap of the anniversary. We love your video. Can you come with us and tell your story about a stove program that we were supporting, which for people who don't know about clean cook stoves, totally look them up. They're phenomenal, not only at helping women, but also the environment. They are a great job producer. Having a clean cook stove in your home is a phenomenal win for people. And so we were helping that local organization get started there.
And clean meaning clean energy. As I'm Googling this, I was picturing like just a clean stove. This is how elementary I am.
Yes. Most people cook over an open fire, which is about breathing in 2 packs of cigarettes of smoke per day. So if you can provide, make an affordable clean cook stove for a family, it's a better way for them, because they're saving a lot of energy, either for firewood or from having to buy charcoal. And then they're also not breathing in that toxic smoke. So anyway, we were helping this local organization, and they wanted to capture that story. And of course, we didn't have a lot of money at the time. I borrowed money from my dad, which is at 30, super responsible of me. But he was like, oh my gosh, you got to go. So I slept in the airport in Florida, went down there, and found this beautiful story of a woman we knew who was a stove seller. And just being back a few months before, I'm there and I'm like, oh my gosh, look at her. She got a door, which I know that sounds so silly to so many of us, but to go from a home that just had a cloth overhang to having a door with a lock is a beautiful thing. And it's a beautiful indicator because it means you had enough money to buy that, but then you also have valuable things inside, which means like you are slowly moving out of extreme poverty, just having that. And of course she was trying not to act too excited, but she had her son in a new red shirt. And I was just like, this is really precious. We get there, start shooting, do the interview. And the producer turns to me and says, this is a non-story. And my heart.
No, he didn't.
Well, it was a she, but yes, she's.
Oh, no, she didn't.
This is not a story. As the woman was talking about her sales and how she's doing, blah, blah, blah. And she said, we need you to take us to a tent camp because people need to see poverty. And this woman is not poor. And I didn't know what to do. And I just said, okay. And so we took, this whole news agency. We eventually got her the shots and they flew out. I was totally dejected. I thought for sure that, later in the week I was going to be on the nightly news. And then now I'm like, well, great. Now it's just a story about Haiti and poverty. And, we were not featured. So I thought that was the end of our organization. We had, not raised that much. I'm like, what are we doing? This is not working, blah, 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 blah. So I ended up just turning it into a blog post, a story that said, there's a woman who's not going to be on the news tonight, but she, because she's not poor, but you made that possible. And I just sent it out as an email to all the donors saying, thank you for making her not poor anymore, And what ended up happening is it got forwarded around a bunch of times. A friend at Warby Parker was like, I sent it to everybody on the team, and it just started to go like mini viral before viral was a thing. And we raised $20,000 in 24 hours, And so I think just having the capacity to put your feelings aside and say, okay, how is this like a teachable moment? Or maybe there are other people who are also might feel enraged like I do and just really saddened that the state of our cultural affairs is about let's just shoot and tell stories of poor people because that's what we want to hear. And that's what will drive engagement and donations. It was a really great lesson for us, and it got us to the next stage of growth of our organization. And clearly we didn't die. We kept going. And it gave me some resiliency. And so whenever things are going wrong, I remember that time where I thought we were going to have to quit. And we ended up writing that blog post.
Becky Straw, you are my hero.
I know.
This is such a good story and a lesson for everyone out there in nonprofit. I can think of many times best laid plans were set and we were thrown into the middle of a situation that was untenable and not at all what we expected. And the way that you pivoted, you made lemonade out of those lemons, and just the idea that it was the launching pad for the next phase of your organization tells me everything about the human being that you are and what your organization is grounded in. I am so moved by that. And I also say that it underscores how much work we have to do to socialize these messages. I mean, whether to mainstream media, if they're not going to listen, then we've got to do it in community, peer to peer, person to person in our own social networks, talking about why this mindset needs to be shifted and why this is a wonderful thing that a door is on its hinges inside here, and why this little boy has a red shirt on, and why we should be proud of that moment. So thank you for that beautiful story. I just ate it all up.
Oh, well, thank you. And I just want to add too that, maybe it seems like I had a lot of hardship and, I think I lived on 12 couches. I never felt more loved in that moment. And that was the best experience of my life. Living more simply was great, but I think what it taught me was asking for help. People are going to gravitate towards wanting to help. When I started asking, I sometimes had 3 places to stay of people texting being like, I'm going out of town, or somebody who worked at Google and was like, oh, I'm going to be in Silicon Valley next week. Stay at my place. I've never felt more cared for and more loved. And I think that's a good development lesson too, is like when you're asking for help and there's people who come out of the woodwork to make it happen for you. And that's a great feeling.
I just love the way you fought for your mission, and I love the richness that it poured back into you. Yours is such a wonderful story.
Thank you.
I was gonna say your story just makes me think of, one of our values from spending our lives on the inside of nonprofits and wanting to jump and do We Are for Good is that we saw a difference in just growing donors versus growing believers of your mission. And believers don't always have the capacity, the like major gift term for that, but the power of what they can do when they believe that whatever is possible can band together, can make the connection, are going to show up for you in moments like this. And I think your story points to that in spades.
That's beautiful.
Okay, I don't want to wrap this up. Becky, you have to go because this means we're starting to wrap up if we're getting to this next question.
Becky, our final question that we ask all our guests is, what is your one good thing? Tell us maybe a life hack, a mantra, something that somebody could take away today. What would you offer our community?
Yep, I think given where we are now in the world, my one good thing is I have had so many unfortunate things happen to me in my life. I lost my mother a few years ago.
Sorry.
I've been let go. I've had, my kids had COVID a few weeks ago. I think just trying to balance all of the hardship has given me so much more empathy for realizing that we need to be kind to ourselves and kind to our teams and make sure that, especially fundraisers and people working inside charities, that they're recognized and they're valued. Last month we decided when we posted some job postings that we would also post what we're being paid and post what we were offering for jobs, because that we felt like was a transparent, right thing to do to make it easier for people to know if they wanted to apply. And I think it's just treating people with dignity and respect. But I think I had to go through actually physically feeling like I've had some bad moments to hopefully make sure my one good thing is like make sure that you're taking care of the people around you, because they're going to make that mission run and make, you have a great team. If you have a great team behind you, it's not on me. It's not me at all. It's the team.
The humility.
I know. We love you. We love this entire conversation. This has been super inspiring. So connect us, your audience, in the audience today, of just how can we run alongside you with the Adventure Project? Where are you on social and all the other things?
Yep, you can go to theadventureproject.org, or we have similar profile names for Facebook and Instagram and the other digital channels, or on LinkedIn. Please, or you can reach out to me personally, Becky Straw at theadventureproject.org. We'd love to connect with anybody, whether it's somebody who wants to get their company more involved, or individually, or become a monthly donor. We would love that. Or if you want to be hired, we would hopefully be hiring again soon. So.
Oh, people, please check this out. And even as you go to the giving page, which was, by the way, very easy. I did it in less than a minute on my mobile, so bravo. But there's a beautiful woman named Charlotte on the giving page who has a stove, again, to your point, company in Kenya. And it's just the power in her stance. And I love what you're doing. You story tells so beautifully. If you have 10 minutes today, go get lost on the Adventure Project's website or on their social channels. It is going to bring you so much joy and make you feel the promise of what could be if community could come together. And so I just really encourage anyone to check it out. And Becky, I just want you to be our friend for life, because you're so extraordinary. You're so kind. I love your vision. And please give Jody our best and just keep going. You guys are doing the hard work and we are behind you, and we just want to amplify it at every turn.
Oh, thank you, John and Becky. It's so nice to be here. I really am. I'm just grateful that you invited me on.
Absolutely.
It's been an honor. Thank you.